Would you like to feel stronger than your grief? Then you're going to want to hear my wonderful interview with Rachel McGonigle. You'll learn about the physical toll associated with grief and the negative effects of unresolved grief. You're going to find out why healing is a choice and why it is important for grievers to heal. Come join Rachel and me for this healing, touching, and very wise interview. Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I'm delighted to have the pleasure of interviewing Rachel McGonigle, who in 2008 endured the unimaginable heartbreak of losing both of her twin baby daughters, Ellie and Aubrey, within 6 days. Ellie lived for just 7 days and Aubrey 11 days. This devastating experience made Rachel painfully aware that society offers little guidance pertaining to healing after loss, and grief is one of our culture's most misunderstood experiences. After she had experienced overwhelming pain and frustration with the limited support she was receiving from therapy and support groups, Rachel took healing into her own hands and embarked on her own path to recovery, refusing to accept that the pain and emptiness she was experiencing had to be permanent. And thanks to her courage and her perseverance, Rachel discovered that healing after loss is possible. She successfully nurtured her own heart and life back to health, and Rachel is now dedicated to sharing the tools, skills, and insights that helped her to heal with others. I'm looking forward to talking with Rachel, who now happily resides in Northern Virginia with her husband, Jason, their blended family of 4 boys, and their dog, Nala, about how we can become more powerful than the pain of grief, the negative effects of unresolved grief, the physical toll of grief, Rachel's personal path to healing, and more for what will surely be a very touching interview filled with inspiring and wise healing insights. Hi, Rachel. A warm welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Thank you. I'm already so touched to be here. It's really beautiful what you do.
Thank you, Rachel. As with you, I mean, Rachel and I were talking. I'm going to tell everyone before we began that she is now in Texas, right?
And currently, I'm working. I'm in Texas right now working.
And the work is?
I'm doing
the California fire.
Yeah, I'm doing. Correct? Yes, I'm headed to California here soon to do fire support for the LA Fire Support, the victims, and working with some support organizations and getting training in place so that everybody is emotionally supported through this loss. I think there's a misunderstanding that losing possessions is not grief, or that if you are grieving, you're superficial and you're focusing on the wrong things, when in reality, losing your home or losing your possessions is just as devastating as a death, and it deserves grief support.
Absolutely. I mean, they're losing their safety. They're losing their touchstones. They're losing their memories. I totally...
Well, the list of losses, it's, long. Yes.
Oh, my gosh. So, well, let's... you certainly are well-equipped to help all these people, and I'm sharing this. We're going to share with our Grief and Rebirth podcast audience what has made you so well-equipped to help them with their grief. So let's begin at the beginning. In 2008, you endured the unimaginable heartbreak of losing your twin daughters, Ellie and Aubrey, within 6 days. What would you like to share with us about that devastating experience and your realization that society offers little guidance pertaining to healing after loss?
It sometimes amazes me that this is almost 17 years ago, that it feels like a moment. At times, it feels like a long time at times. But when I think back, I can describe it as the worst. It was just such a sad, overwhelmingly powerless time in my life where, because my little girls, they lived for a time and they got very sick. And part of that was they did suffer, and we had to make really intense decisions about their care and their well being. I also had a 2.5-year-old little boy
Wow.
at the time. So I didn't only have my girls to focus on, I had another child. And it was fast and confusing, and I felt blindsided. And then it felt in the blink of an eye, they were both gone. And the dust settled, and the messaging I was getting was a mother who loses a child will never be okay. And I was 28 years old with a beautiful blonde-haired, blue-eyed, happy little boy, saying to myself, this cannot be my future, because my daughters were important, and they didn't just die, they lived, and I wanted their lives to be honored. But their brother did not deserve to have a grief-stricken mother. He was just a baby. It was no more his fault that his sister died than it was anyone else's. And so I felt at first very motivated and very focused on being the mom to him that I wanted to be. But I will admit it wasn't just about him, because I've had people talk to me say, well, I didn't have a child. I didn't have another child to focus on, so I didn't have that motivation. But believe it or not, my son wasn't even enough. He was part of it, but he wasn't even enough. I had to make a decision in myself that my life needed to be more than the grief of my daughters, that my dreams, goals, aspirations, value, connections,
Right.
all of those things needed to outlive their death. And so it wasn't a selfish choice that I made, but I will admit that I did factor my own well-being into it. I mattered too. My heart mattered too. The life that I was going to move towards mattered too. I didn't want to be done. I didn't want my life to just amount to being controlled by my grief. And I wanted to fight for my son.
Well, look at what you've accomplished, and we'll talk about how you accomplished it. Look what you've accomplished. You got through this devastating grief. You helped yourself to heal, and now you're helping other people thanks to what you went through, in a way, which is very similar to my story. I went through this terrible accident. I've done all this healing, and here I am today helping other people to know that you can get hit by grenades in life and you can heal it and transform and keep on going, and role model for other people too. You're a tremendous role model.
And that was my biggest frustration. And as I was looking around going, who were those who've gone before me? Who can I model? Who can I follow? And instead of finding people who wanted to lead me towards healing, I only found people who wanted to convince me that hurting was all that there was. And that was when I had the realization that a lot of grievers have not healed, right? It's not like this process that's inevitable. Like you go through a loss, you grieve, and then you heal. It was more like you go through a loss, you grieve, and then maybe if you're lucky, you just kind of exist. And so I was frustrated. And this is why I teach what I teach, because I promised myself that if I learn how to do this, I will teach everyone who wants to know, because I didn't want them to experience the frustration I felt looking
Right.
around for someone to guide me, and there was nobody there. Right? Grief is a universal experience. We all experience loss. It's not a if, it's a when, and some of us more than others. So this idea that we don't have anyone to go before us, that there is no path, we're all reinventing the wheel and just bumbling through on our own, to me is a ridiculous notion. If we have something to offer and share, we should at least make it available. That doesn't mean everybody wants it or everyone has to choose it, but I at least want them to know that it's there for them should they ever decide that healing is something they want to choose.
They kind of have to choose that they want to live and that there's purpose in their lives beyond the what has happened to them. And it's a very tough, challenging path, but it's very rewarding when you make your way through it. Right? Would you agree?
Yeah, well, and there's a lot of mixed messages in our culture around what we're capable of after loss. And there are messages out there saying you don't have any power anymore. It's not up to you. Time either heals your wounds or maybe it doesn't, but grief is your identity now. And I felt very rebellious against those notions. I said, I may not have been able to choose losing Aubrey and Ellie. I didn't want to lose them. I would have done anything in my power if I could to have saved them, to have helped them. I wanted to raise them. I loved them, but that wasn't the choice given to me. I was not in control of that, but I was in charge of my own inner world. And I was not going to allow grief to be the decider of how I was going to feel in 1 year, 5 years, or who I was going to become. You know, grief, it does change us. I don't want to say that like, oh, we're phased. It does change us, but we get to choose how it changes us. And that was where my focus was. I don't believe that all of our losses or horrific life experiences are inherently good, but how we choose to respond to them instead of just react to them can create good from something that offers no good. Like, we have to be participants in our own path. We have to create the good out of these things. And that choice is the most important part. Grief, healing really is a choice, but our culture sometimes doesn't phrase it as a choice, and it breaks my heart. I get worried at times wondering, are there grievers out there who don't even know that they have a choice? It's one thing if you don't want to choose it, but if you don't even know that you have a choice, to me, that is heartbreaking.
And that's why we're here today, to tell them that they have a choice, to let people know that they have a choice. And what does that look like? So I want to ask you, exactly what kinds of therapy and support groups did you try? And what was it about those groups that didn't meet your needs? I'm just going, before you even answer that, I'm going to offer that when my husband died next to me in the car accident and I started going to grief groups, I had been in counseling and all before, so I sort of had a little bit more of a handle, even though I was devastated and all of that. And all of a sudden in my support group, the woman said, you've got it a little more together than some of these other people. How would you feel if they start to call you and discuss things with you? Now, I was still raw and I was not in any way the way I would have been today, ready to try to help someone. And that turned me off too, because I wasn't getting the help kind of where I was at that I needed. So what was your experience? Did you go to group therapy?
Yeah, so I dove into the support groups pretty immediately and was instantly turned on. Well, I had a sort of a sobering moment, like a scared straight moment at a support group where it was specifically for parents who have lost children. And there was a couple there. You sort of sit in a circle and you go around and say what your situation is. And I was new to the group, new very early in my grief. And this couple shared this very sad story about how their 15-year-old daughter was murdered by their neighbor boy, who I guess had a major crush on her. And she, politely rejected him. And he, excuse me.
No problem.
Anyway, it went very badly and she ended up getting murdered. And I mean, it was horrific and it was sad, and they were devastated and they were angry, and they had even at one point talked about how they weren't sure what to do with the rest of their life. What's the point, right? Really intense stuff. And after we sort of broke from that initial part, we went to go get our, coffee or tea, have a little break, and before we regrouped, and another person in the support group came up to me and said, I'm glad to have you here. And I said, I'm so sorry about this couple. How long has it been? How can I offer my condolences? And the woman said to me, oh, it's been 11 years.
Oh my goodness.
I would have thought that it was 6 months ago, right?
Oh my gosh.
And it was this moment where I thought to myself, I can't be like that in 11 years. That cannot be me in 11 years. And so when I switched support groups, I decided not to follow that support group, but it just sort of was this reality check for me that said, if you are not proactive with your pain, it won't automatically resolve itself. So if you don't want to be there, you're going to have to figure out a new path, what to do. You're going to have to take responsibility for that, because you don't, I thought, 11 years. And so support groups they eventually became a place where people stayed stuck. There's just a lot of commiserating, a lot of retelling the same story.
What I found.
Yes, not a lot of healing activities and forward motion. And the culture can be really judgmental that those of us who want healing were almost accused of not loving our loved ones, right? That our pain was the only representation of our love. And if we left that pain, then we were choosing not to love our loved ones, which is completely untrue, but that myth exists. And then so I stepped into talk therapy, and I did have a very competent talk therapist. You know, I would never say anything bad about him, but he didn't have a clue about grief. It was just sort of like, tell me how you're feeling. I'll encourage you. It won't always be this hard. And I needed tangible action steps. I was desperate for things that I could do every day that would help support me, help me heal, right? I didn't want just ideas. I didn't want to just talk about my feelings.
Right.
So that's when I stepped out into a different path and said, all right, these things are not working. And the reasons why they're not working is this, right? For me in my life. So I'm going to focus on those tangible steps. And then when I figured them out, I'm going to tell everyone else about them.
So tell me, so when you took healing into your own hands, which is so admirable, what were first of all, I want to know the emotional, physical tolls of grief you were experiencing besides the devastation. I know that it affects us physically and all. And then what were the steps you took towards your path to recovery? And then after that, I want to talk to you about what were the specific healing tools and insights that helped you.
Sure.
Let's talk about this path. It's like amazing.
Right. So first, the symptoms I was experiencing, like the toll that it was taking, there were there's lots of things. Okay. There's lots of ways grief was affecting me, but the big ones that I noticed, first, emotionally, I could tell that my light just sort of went out, right? The young, vivacious, life-loving, people-loving woman that I was at 28 years old was hurting, and her inner world was lonely, and she was scared, right? And when I would look at myself in the mirror, I didn't even recognize my old self, right? I would just see this sort of hollow version of myself looking back with fear in her eyes. Like, am I going to come through this or not? And it was hard for me to muster up the hope and because I'm a pusher. I'll do the hard things. I was like, you can do it. You got this, right? And it was the first time in my life where you can do it. You got this was not working. It was not sufficient for me. And then I also noticed what was happening to my body. I was thin. I had given birth to twins, and in a matter of months, I went from 145 pounds to 117 pounds, wow. Right? My appetite had gone away. My sleep was hit or miss. Every day was just about survival. Get up, take care of your son. Don't really do anything more than that because you don't have the bandwidth. I was emotionally exhausted as much as I was physically exhausted. And I worried a lot. That was the other thing. I was never a paranoid person. I never worried much about bad things happening. And all of a sudden, every noise, I'd check on my son. Every car, are we seatbelted in? Like, do we have a plan? Right. All of a sudden, the world became a very insecure place. And so those three things, like the physical toll of grief on my body, this constant preoccupation I had with, scary and bad things, and then also just not recognizing my own self in the mirror anymore. Those things were high on my radar and I was concerned. So I started doing what I decided that I was going to attempt to trust my gut a bit. I was still seeking information. I was reading, I was seeking out articles. Back in the day, this was 2008, we had AOL chat rooms and blogs, right? Things have evolved significantly since Aubrey and Ellie died. And so I was trying to get information. I was, reading books, but that information took time to get. So in the meantime, I thought, okay, what helps me feel good? And that's when I started drinking a cup of tea. Tea was helping me feel good. And I realized I'd already been leaning on it, but I just didn't connect the dots. Whenever I was overwhelmed, a cup of tea. Whenever I needed some reassurance, a cup of tea. Whenever I knew I was going to have to bump into somebody or explain the story, a cup of tea. Cup of tea on airplanes, cup of tea in the car, right? And the warmth and the deliciousness and the quietness of it, it was there for me in the middle of the night. It was there for me in the middle of the day. And I just began to build this little support system on my tea ritual. And it wasn't just the tea. I mean, tea is a superfood, it's a powerful ingredient, but that ritual of steeping it, smelling it, holding the warm cup, tasting it,
You were
taking the
nurturing
time.
yourself. You were nurturing yourself.
Yes, I was. And that self-care started to inform other levels of self-care. So I thought, okay, I need to, I need this reassurance in this cup of tea. I need this comfort. But then as I'm trying to get a handle on my physical health, tea is also a superfood. And I thought, well, what other superfoods, what other things can help rebuild my body? And that's when I really dove into because I was raised with natural health, a lot of alternative health perspective. And so I said, okay, I'm going to be intentional about reintroducing this to my life. What supplements can I take? What kind of nutrition can I eat? How can I guard my sleep? What essential oils will be comforting to me? Right? Anything that I can pull from that sort of holistic natural medicine side. And I saw the effects and I saw them pretty quickly. It wasn't a magic cure for my grief, but I went from barely being able to function to making it through the day, then making it through a week, then getting a little bit better sleep, then my appetite returning a bit, right? And I saw that it was making a difference. And I went from that scared place of, I don't know if I have what it takes to do this, to no, I do, because these little tiny steps had really big dividends. And I didn't have to go to a retreat, which I'm not saying anything bad about retreats. Retreats can be amazing, but I didn't have to take big steps every once in a while when I could take little tiny steps every single day. And that accumulative process was more restorative and more healing. And more importantly, it built my confidence that maybe I wasn't healed right now. And maybe life still had some really painful moments, but I think I'm going to get there someday. And that's all I needed. I just needed to know that I was in charge of what was going to happen to my heart. That grief wasn't going to get the final say.
It's beautiful. And that you were giving yourself a glimmer of hope. I want to ask you two questions. Were you in relationship at the time? Were you getting support?
I was married at the time to the father of my girls and my older son. All my children have the same dad. But I was not getting much emotional support out of that relationship. So, which I think in some cases I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of grievers now, that sometimes we have to be careful leaning on our spouse because our spouse is grieving too. It is okay to build a different support system. And also, he didn't want to be my support system. And I pretty early on accepted that and said, I'm not going to try to make you be. I'm going to go and build the support system.
He couldn't. He didn't have. I have found that if you look at grief on a scale of 1 to 10, and you grieve to a 10, which is, you're devastated, normal. But if it goes even beyond that, it often has roots in things that happened to you earlier on that are exacerbated by the grief, like any abandonment issues or things that go on.
I teach my clients that too. Your earliest unresolved loss, right, is we have to go all the way back to the earliest loss that has been left unresolved. A lot of times this big loss is what brings people to me. But when we actually look at their life and uncover their journey, I see that there's lots of losses that came before that we need to resolve as well. You can't just pick the big one. You gotta heal them all.
So in a way, grief can be an opportunity because it's getting you to face or giving you, if you can find the courage to.
No, you're exactly right. Well, grief will always present you with an opportunity, but it's still up to us to decide what we're going to do with that opportunity. And I see people pick both directions all the time, right? I see people say, okay, I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to grow. I'm willing to establish a support system, right? I'm willing to do these things. And I see other people say, no, I'm not. It's not my fault. It's not fair. It's different for me. Whatever their reasonings are. And sometimes those people choose later. Sometimes they never choose. But even the opportunity still doesn't have power over us. We have to choose to step into the opportunity or not.
Yes, yes. And that's why you always say that you can become more powerful than the pain of grief.
Absolutely.
Right?
And you do that with support, skills, and tools.
What kind of support were you getting while you were doing the tea thing and all that? Did you switch to a different type of support?
Well, so first of all, using that bit of instinctual side of myself, like just trusting, okay, because I did have a very loving family. I have two amazing sisters. My parents were wonderful. I had an amazing friend who just showed up at the time in my life. And we weren't even, the strange thing, we were close, but we weren't even that close. But she just like stepped into my life in this amazing way. And some people that I thought would step into my life didn't. And I think that's a hard lesson in grief, is sometimes we have to recalibrate and adjust our expectations and be willing to take in the support that's available instead of lamenting and being angry about the support that isn't.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of acceptance that goes on when you're dealing with a situation like this, because your life has been turned upside down and things get transformed, friendships.
Yes, it's a new lens. It's also, people have different levels of capacity. Not everybody knows, that was the first thing that I noticed is, nobody knew what to do with the grieving mom. I'd walk into the room and watch people just walk right out, right? I represented everybody's worst nightmare. And as grievers, we all do, whether we lose a husband, go through a horrible car accident, lose a child, lose a sibling, a parent. We are the living, breathing representation of what scares everyone else to death, right? These hard things about life that none of us get to avoid. And that doesn't mean we all will have similar losses, but loss is inevitable. It's not an if, it's a when. And so lost skills are life skills. And like all life skills, they have to be learned. We're not born with this automatic download in our brain that says, oh, when the worst imaginable thing happens, do it like this, do these things, right? And I think a lot of people are shocked by that, where they're going, but I'm at my lowest point and now I have to learn new skills. I have to accept new tools. I have to become more self-aware. I have to forgive my friend who decided that they couldn't support me well through this, and be open to a friend who I barely even know but seems to really want to show up well for me, or whatever it is. And the answer is, yeah, you do, if you want healing,
if you choose it.
Yes.
If you choose it. And it's not an easy path. I once had a therapist say to me that the bravest people in the world go for help. They address their issues. It's much easier to hide from it, but the rewards at the other end of it, are
you can't even compare.
Right.
Well, and grief is also unique in the sense that our society is actually very supportive of people who want their grief to control their life, right? There's this sort of forgiveness of, oh, I can't imagine what you've been through. Whatever you've gone through, you're right. It's changed you. It's instead of the support that says, I don't know what you've experienced, but I believe in your capacity to heal. And with the right support, tools, and skills, that healing becomes possible. Again, people don't have to choose it, but this belief that you don't have any power over it is a lie. It is a lie that keeps people stuck. It is a lie that robs people of living to their potential. It robs them of deep, meaningful connections and relationships. And that's what unresolved grief does to people. It steals from them. That's why my goal is, if anyone shows up and says, I don't know how, I don't even know it's possible, but I want to resolve my grief, I say, yes, I will show you the way, because I believe that it gives them back their freedom. It empowers them to be able to contribute and to restore their value, and to be able to look at themselves in the mirror and like who they see, when grief wanted to rob them of that.
Right. And the other thing that is a little scary to people with their unresolved grief is often what unresolved grief has to do with the unresolved other issues in their lives. So grief kind of opens the door.
Well, yeah, it's right? I always say it's like a magnifying glass. Like, grief doesn't cause more problems, but it magnifies all of the dysfunction that has been glossed over because you had a different coping level. But grief robs you of your bandwidth. And so all of a sudden you're dealing with stuff with, no capacity. And so you have to expand your capacity, which is totally possible. We're not limited in our capacity, but it requires support and learning and tools and a perspective. Like, yes. And you got to be hungry for it. You have to want it, because it isn't easy, like you said, but oh man, it's worth it.
It's so rewarding. So I am fascinated that you were at a speaking event and a woman challenged you and yelled at you and said, if you loved your daughters as much as I loved my son, you could never heal. So there's someone who is really just like that couple that you met with their daughter, she's got her story, she's got her pain, and she's sticking to it. How did you handle that? And I'm sure she had a lot of rage because she was angry.
Oh, she confronted me. She confronted me publicly in front of many other women.
I mean, how did that feel in your body? And how did you?
Well, I mean, initially, like in that instant, it hurt because I felt judged. I felt that she was telling me that I didn't love my girls enough.
Right.
Right. That was the initial immediate sensation that I had in my body, my heart, my mind. But pretty quickly, I was able to almost instantly shift into a realization that all of her words and her anger and her pain really had nothing to do with me, and that she was struggling in her grief. Right. And I wasn't excusing her confrontational behavior, but I did have a ton of compassion around, like, this is a hurting woman. She's a hurting woman, and she doesn't understand that she can heal and love her son.
So how did you respond to her in front of that huge audience? What did you say to her?
No, I barely responded. All I said was, I don't believe. I didn't say that. I said, if love and pain are directly proportional, what hope do any of us have? Right. And she stormed off. She didn't want to hang out. She just wanted to confront me and let me know that it was different for her, and that her hurting was a reflection of how much she loved her son.
Well, I want to validate your poise in that situation, because I think something like that would catch a lot of people off guard and not know how to quite respond to that.
Yeah, it wasn't, but I mean, I think I felt a sense of obligation to handle it well because I was speaking at that event, right? So the eyes were on me, and I didn't want to blow it. But even my sister, she was with me, and she saw everything. And later she said, I don't know how you didn't burst into tears. She's like, I think I would have just, started crying in front of everybody. And trust me, I had tears later, but they weren't even tears about what she said. It was more that my heart just broke for how hard grief really can be. Because I remember being in that overwhelmed place, not sure I would ever get out again. And I think a big part, I know I'm stubborn. I know that I do not like to be told what to do with my heart, and I love my autonomy. And so I think there's a natural part of my personality that resisted that lie that, grief is forever, and once a griever, always a griever. But I also did have a really wonderful support system around me. And that gives you courage, and it gives you stamina to do things. And that's why I developed my program, because not everybody has that support system around them. Sometimes they are actually very unsupported, or they have counter support, or they have people putting a ton of pressure on them to stay in pain, or to just get over it and not validate their pain, right? And so providing that support system for the people who don't naturally have access to it can be a life-changing experience for grievers, because support does make an enormous difference.
So let's talk about your program. It teaches grievers how to reclaim their physical and emotional health after loss. You have one-on-one sessions, and you do it also in group format. I would assume some of your groups meet via Zoom. Let us know everything, Rachel. Just tell us all the ways that someone's grieving, really upset. How do you help them? How can they come to you to reclaim their lives when they're in so much pain?
So my program is very intentionally designed, and it is a 12-session program. So I don't work one session at a time. The commitment is a full 12 sessions, because that is all of the steps that my program has in it, so that we can address the physical toll of grief, the emotional impact of grief, and then the practical side of grief. What do tools, skills, resources, and support look like long term? Because ultimately, what I want is to equip them that when they're finished with me, they can go lead their grief instead of their grief leading them, right? I don't want them dependent on me. And so it starts out very specifically. We spend the first third of the program addressing the physical support needed. So I get them on supplements. We examine their exercise, lack thereof, or too much, or whatever. We examine their sleep. Are they struggling? Are they having trouble? Where can we help? We look at their nutrition. We get them set up on meal plans, recipes, awareness around food, all kinds of things, right? We get the coffee out. There's not a lot of elimination, but there's certain things that we grow in awareness.
I love one of the things that you're telling me, and I love this, is that you're teaching them how to also embrace and love themselves while they're going through this, and nurture themselves, which is so important.
Well, willpower is not enough to get you through grief. You cannot just will yourself through. If you are not building your body back up and restoring your capacity to even keep going, it doesn't matter what kind of deeper emotional work you want to do. If your body's waving a white flag saying like, I surrender, I can't go any further, I don't have the nutrition, I don't have the rest, I don't have the chemical balance, right? We need to start there. And that holistic physical foundation of grief support is what we build all other healing on. So once we get our body tended to, we see the difference it's making in our central nervous system. We improve our sleep, right? We start feeling a little bit less at the mercy of our pain. Then we can dive into doing the emotional work, which really means we do identity work, because grief asks us a really important question: who am I now? So we need to dive deep into who were you because of your loved one? Who are you without them? What other messaging shapes your belief about who you are? Because the goal is, we want to work in our lives. We want to live from identity, not for identity. So we need to distinguish, am I doing things to create who I am, or do I know who I am and these things are a reflection of that? And grief puts all of that under assault. So then we go into deep identity work. And then once we're more aware of who we are, why we're that way, what our value systems are, what life can look like based on what's important to us, then we pile on the practical skills. What support system is around you? Are you asking for help? Are you setting boundaries with the areas in your life that are not healthy, supportive? Are we missing any skill sets? I do a lot of communication work. We learn how to actually tell people what we need, not just how we feel, what we need, because our feelings are information. They are not the only thing that we're supposed to tell people about. And I just put together a practical grief plan for them so that with all of this support and awareness, then they can say, oh, here's how I self-care. Here's how I make modifications. Here's how I stay connected to myself, so that by the time those 12 weeks are over, they know who they are. They understand what grief is doing to their body and exactly how to support it. And then they can make informed choices to create the life they want, not the life someone else wants. The life that they want, because now they are equipped, empowered, and aware.
That's beautiful. And it's often a new life that they were not even aware that they could access. So give us an uplifting story of someone you've healed, who has healed through your program, and how that worked for her. Because I'm sure you have so many people in so many different situations that come to you.
Yeah, so I work with any kind of griever with any kind of loss. So I don't only work with women who've lost babies. I work with all kinds. And the majority of my clients have either lost a spouse or a parent. Those are my biggest ones. But I have all kinds, even intangible losses, right? People have lost a business. People have lost a home. People have lost their health, right? We work on lots of loss. But I particularly had a client whose name I will not share, but I will share her story. It was a horrible, tragic thing. She left her children with her sister. They were staying a weekend with their aunt, so her and her husband could just go on an anniversary trip. And while they were away, her son drowned in her sister's pool.
Oh my God.
It was a horrible, tragic accident. He just got stuck under a floaty. By the time they realized that, he wasn't around, he had drowned. And she called me and said, like, it's emotional even for me to talk about. She said, I don't just need your help grieving the loss of my son. My relationship with my sister hangs in the balance, and I don't want to lose her too. And she said, I don't even know if it's possible to come back from this, but I want to try. And 12 sessions later, she said, and I quote, I didn't even think this was possible, but now I know that it is.
That's beautiful. And her sister also, I'm sure, had plenty of grieving on her end also. Wow.
Oh, yes. And we also had, husbands that were irate, and we had nieces and nephews that were heartbroken. And it was just such a overwhelming, tragic situation. But I even just remember her face. She really didn't know what to do, but she also knew that she could not do nothing. And she was not just going to give up on her heart, her family, or her sister. And to be honest, was actually the work I did with her sister, because her sister was holding so much guilt. She was really resisting repairing that relationship, and she was resisting healing, like she should punish herself for the rest of her life.
Right.
So we did deep work there, but it's in those moments when I think there are things that happen in life that we can honestly look at them and say, this is impossible. but we want to make sure that our feelings don't become our facts, because just because something feels impossible doesn't make it impossible. And at least it's worth the try, because you might surprise yourself.
Fun. How did her sister find you, Rachel?
So it was actually like a kind of a referral of a referral of a referral. So my
I mean,
ex-marriage.
are you a former, I mean, you're a grief coach.
Yeah,
So,
no, I'm a grief coach, and I'm a holistic grief coach. And I have a website, and I have an Instagram page, but really it's that particular one. Somebody found me because I spoke at a conference, and then a friend of a friend said maybe she could help. And then, they make the phone calls. So
so,
it's, you know,
so the sister, you were helping her sister, and then which was beautiful. You were
yes, I
working
was
with both
helping
of them.
once I understood what the situation entailed, I had said, I need both of you involved. We got to do this together. And so I worked with them both separately, and then I eventually blended them into doing work together. And it took time. It was not a fast process. But when I say it took time, it took a number of months. It did not take a number of decades. And that's another thing I want grievers to understand is you do not have to suffer for decades until hoping that one day you wake up and it's just magically lifted, or time has finally healed you. You can start taking steps today that offer comfort and hope. And it's not an instant process. I don't want to sprinkle pixie dust on it, but it does alleviate and shift and change in a way that allows you to function in your life, to gain different perspective, to find real rest. And that process just starts with saying, I don't want to just wait. I want to be proactive. I want to take whatever step I can. And sometimes that proactivity is a lot of resting. It's a lot of learning. It's a lot of, hugs. It's not always this deep push and striving, but we have to start there with this whole mentality that it takes our participation to get the ball rolling. It won't just descend from heaven and poof, we're magically fixed or healed, or it all makes sense now, and it will never make sense. There's no reason, no, answer to questions that resolve the pain. I remember telling my mom, God himself could come down and tell me why Aubrey and Ellie had to die. And unless he puts my babies back in my arms, it won't matter a hill of beans. Because I wasn't grieving my lack of cognitive understanding. I was grieving not having my babies in my arms.
Right. Oh, wow. Well, speaking of sisters, I want to ask you about your sister, Crystal, because you have an inspiring journey with Crystal that you created from your tea thing. You created a collection of 6 unique tea blends, which you call Teamotions, which I love. I think that's so clever. And they're each tailored to address emotional, physical, and mental well-being issues. So tell us about that and how, and you've started to say incorporating it into a routine helps a person thrive with their stressors. So tell us about Teamotions.
Absolutely. So it was my sister who was watching me use tea to comfort myself. And some days I had 10 cup of tea days, and other days I had 3 cup of tea days. And at one point she sat with me we had this big brown armchair, and she kind of nestled in with me while I'm holding my tea and getting through my grief. And she said to me, Rachel, I wish there was something that we could put in your tea that would help you feel better. And it was a light bulb moment for both of us. And we said, that's it. Let's find what you can add to an already warm, soothing, delicious cup of tea that would enhance its well-being properties. And this could be a tool for grievers or hurting people or people who are stressed and overwhelmed, because tea already has so many healing properties, and we just wanted to up-level them. So we set out to create 6 different blends. Each one has a unique emotional component. We used adaptogen herbs, Nervine's other healing herbs, tons of superfoods and other botanicals to create organic, all natural, whole food, delicious teas that serve to support your emotional well-being. We had that company together for 10 years, and I actually left that company in 2019 to do this full time, to go into grief support. And she took the company on her own, got a new business partner, and she is still making sure that the world has these beautiful teas to lean on and to support themselves. They're award-winning, they're organic, They
Wow,
are
that's
wonderful
great.
to use if you're grieving, but they're also a wonderful gift to give a griever especially when we don't know what to give them. And that quiz you were talking about, that will
Yeah.
help guide
You
you.
have a quiz that
Yes.
fascinated me that helps a person identify which tea is right for them.
Yeah. And
Tell us
that's my
about that.
sister's genius. She created that tea. So it'll basically help you assess what your physical symptoms are, what your emotional symptoms are, and then tell you which teas will be most supportive and beneficial to you.
Well, we'll have to put a link to Teamotions on the show notes with the show notes here. And you also have a generous free gift you're offering members of Grief and Rebirth today. Want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so I created an emotional well-being recipe book that offers my best teas, my best broths, and also my best blender soups. Because when you're grieving, you need warm foods, warm, but you also need easy stuff that doesn't take 900 ingredients and 47 steps. And so I have that recipe book available for anyone who wants it. The recipes are amazing,
Well,
easy, nourishing, delicious.
we'll provide a link for that also. And Rachel, is healing in your mind? We've talked about healing being a choice. Is it possible for anyone who makes that choice? Are there people who don't heal anyway, or does everybody make that?
So I believe absolutely anybody can make that choice. If you haven't read Viktor Frankl's A Man's Search for Meaning, that book is revolutionary when it talks about what it really means to choose our attitude and our behavior in circumstances that we can't control. And I remember reading that book, hearing about how this man survived the concentration camps, how his entire family was killed in the gas chambers. Yet he, even in that moment, when everybody would give him a pass and say, you should be broken forever, you could be angry forever, right? It's some of the most atrocious things we've ever heard in our life. And even in that moment, he observed, not only in himself, but in others, that even in the same situation, people were making different choices. Some were giving someone their last bite of bread. Some were sharing a blanket, while others were stealing or, betraying or doing. And so if circumstances are what determine your capacity to heal, his experience proved that if they were all in the same circumstance, they should have all of the same response, but they didn't have the same response, which tells me that our choice to heal is internal. It is not determined by external factors. So if that is what you want, if you have to want it, it has to be a decision that you align with. But if that's what you want, you can choose it. No one will force you. There's no rule that says you have to, but a belief system that says you can't or it's impossible is lying to you. And truth is important in grief because there is no path if we don't have any truth.
That's so true. And if you don't resolve it, I always liken it to you're carrying a backpack full of pain with you everywhere you go for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it will control you if you let it.
Absolutely. And what is the Rachel tip for finding joy in life?
Oh man, I have lots of them.
Well, you can give us 3 or 4.
Yes. So one of the things that I just think is so valuable is every day carving out a minute to be present. We're always preparing for the future or we're always analyzing the past. But when you this is how I maintain my joy is whenever I'm drinking my cup of tea, which is now probably 2 or 3 times a day, I use that time to check in with myself, right? To just be present to say, what's going on? Where am I at? What do I need? What's important to me? And it just brings me right back down to all the things that matter. Because even after loss, even when we have had this, insane life experience that recalibrates our perspective, we're still human and we can still get off course. And that daily cup of tea is like this 5 minutes of just self-care, comfort, love that I say, all right, recheck in. And I come away from those cups of tea regrounded, refocused, right? A little bit more aware and not distracted by all the things past and all the things forward. And it just reminds me that even when life is so hard, there's just value in it and meaning in it and opportunity in it. And I can shift and make a new choice anytime I want if I feel that maybe I've lost my way. And And then watching my boys. So I had another baby after Aubrey and Ellie died. So I had a 2.5-year-old when they died. And then I went on to have another little boy. And I watch my boys and how they're thriving. They're incredibly happy. They're well-rounded. They're capable. They're strong. They're doing well in life. And whenever I see them, I think back to all of the times I thought, this is too hard. I can't do this. And I'm so filled with joy that I persevered for their benefit, because they will never understand what I felt. And it's not their job to understand. It was my job to be their mother and create an opportunity where they would understand that they have choices instead of me robbing them of those choices.
And if you hadn't healed and transformed, it would have probably been a backpack that they carried around in their lives, the rest of their lives, because there would have been so many, they might have felt guilty being happy or whatever sets up. So look at the role modeling that you're doing for them to let them know. And they're also learning from you that you can heal. There are things that people can do to heal.
Yeah. Well, and you cannot guarantee that your life will be easy. I did all the right things. All I did was get pregnant again after my first baby to build our family, because I was young and a mom, and that's what we were doing. I did not commit a crime. I did not use drugs, right? I don't have any of the things where I say, oh, I brought it on myself, or, oh, I failed there, or, oh, I did something wrong. I did all the right things, and I still got all the wrong results. And that is a hard lesson in life. But even when I got the wrong results, I could still decide how I was going to integrate and process those results into my life, and still decide who I would become in the face of life that didn't go the way that I hoped. And that is an important life skill, because what happens when my boys face something that was not their fault and not their doing, and is just hard and heartbreaking? I don't want to just hand them an excuse and say, well, life is ruined, or go ahead and hurt other people,
or you're going to have to go ahead and deal. That's the way it is.
Right. Whatever. When I could say, no, yes, it's painful, and I will be here to love and support you. But you still get to decide who you become through this. It does not get to decide for you.
Right.
And I'm not the only one that has been faced with that reality.
It's a beautiful thing that you've done with your life, and what a blessing. What a blessing for your boys, really. I mean, my son is older than your boys, but he, as we were saying, he has said to me, Mom, there's been nothing worse than seeing you in total despair, and nothing better than seeing you be able to have joy again. And that, I feel, is a legacy. Excuse me?
Said, what a good son. What a sweet, sweet son.
Yeah, right. So that is such a gift that he gave me, but also in response to the gift that I gave him by healing and not throwing a backpack on his shoulders for him to carry the rest of his life. Rachel, I love your life-changing statement that grief doesn't get to be the boss of me. Wow, that's so great. Thank you for the remarkable ways you're helping the grieving to heal through the tools, the skills, and insights that helped you to heal, for creating your unique healing teas that support people who wish to overcome their life challenges. And from my heart, I want to thank you for this healing, inspiring, and touching interview on Grief and Rebirth podcast. As I like to say, to be continued. Thank you, Rachel, and many blessings.
Thank you.
Right back to you. Thanks for tuning in to Grief and Rebirth. Remember, you can dive deeper into everything we've discussed by checking out the show notes and all past episodes at ireneweinberg.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and wherever you love to hang out online. Plus, we're on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe and never miss a video. For those of you listening, you'll find links to my 2 books, Good to the Last Drop and They Serve Bagels in Heaven, in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see those books listed right above, so don't miss out. And here comes a special treat. If you sign up for Audible as a first-time user using my link, which you can find in the show notes, you can get They Serve Bagels in Heaven for free. And finally, People often ask me what I read, what I use, and what I recommend for healing and self-care. So I've carefully curated a compilation of those items to share with you. You can head over to kit.co/grief and rebirth to check them out. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, many blessings.